All right, so this is conditional statements. There are some truth tables at the end of truth tables today. But let's go over some of the symbols just to remember this and how some of the truth tables work, and then we'll add one more in, which is where our main focus will be today. But P and Q is the upside down V, okay? P and Q. This is upside down like V. That's the and. We'll go over the truth table rules in just a minute. P or Q is the right side up one. So just like the union and intersection, the union looked like a U. The intersection was upside down. So it means or. So P or Q. We did not P, which is a squiggly line out in front. The one we are adding today is the if-then. That's where we'll spend the majority of time talking about today. But it is, you would say that if P, then Q. So that arrow means if P, then Q. And that is a conditional statement. If this happens, then this should happen, okay? Then the other one that I think we might have saw a little bit even last week is the double arrow, is if and only if. So P will happen if and only if Q happens. And what that means is it works both ways. So that's saying if P happens, then Q has to happen, but also if Q happens, then P has to happen. I don't have a truth table rule for that one because I don't believe we do those truth tables. That's called biconditional because it's conditional two different ways. So let's jump to do one topic, then we'll talk about those truth table rules. I'll go back there in just a second. So on this one right here, by the way, I don't really know what's happening with Alex and the shading right here. Apparently they updated all their headings on these tables and it's like impossible to read. So if you noticed, did y'all notice that yesterday? I don't know when they did that. I've already messaged it. I messaged somebody else and they said they've heard that from other people, so hopefully they get it fixed fast. Okay, so this has three different statements. We're just doing the symbols for these, like we were doing the V and the upside down V, the squiggly line, the arrow. She is jogging is P. Q is Nicole is in history class. R is it is Tuesday. One of the things to note here is if there is a comma or a quotation, that usually signifies that a parentheses is coming, okay? So it is Tuesday would be R. Or Shin is not jogging. So there's an or. I'll come back and add the parentheses in a second. Shin is not jogging would be not P. And Nicole is in history class. So that's Q. All right. So like that's the way it looks if you read this. But if I say it, I'm saying it is Tuesday. Or you have these other options. So where that parentheses is, we're going to put a parentheses around the second part to denote that it is Tuesday is separate from the she is jogging and Nicole's in history class. So wherever there's a parentheses, wherever there's a comma, you will probably do some sort of parentheses. Shin is jogging, so that's P. If and only if, that's the double arrow. It is Tuesday. So Shin is jogging if and only if it is Tuesday. That's R. There's a comma right there, so we'll come back to that. And Nicole is not in history class. Not in history, so not Q. All right, so on this one, my parentheses is, or my comma is Shin is jogging if and only if it is Tuesday. So I would do a parentheses around the P if and only if P. P if and only if R, okay?
When do you put parentheses?
What'd you say? So with the comma right there, so you see the comma right there after Tuesday. So it says Shin is jogging if and only if it is Tuesday. All right, so that tells me whenever you see that comma means a parentheses is there or coming. So on the first one it is Tuesday, or the Shin is jogging and not Nicole is not in history. So that's the parentheses there. So the parentheses is going to go where that comma is. The comma or the parentheses would only go around when there's two things. So like that's why I don't put it around it is Tuesday. All right. Got it? That was kind of loud. Save this one real quick. Let's do another one of these real quick before we move on. Let me try to write it out here and see if I can highlight it all. All right, on this one, we'll make that blue, that red. That one green. Okay. So Amy is practicing basketball. Amy is practicing basketball. Here's your if and only if. Henry is not playing piano, so you got to be careful with the not in there. Henry is not playing piano. Or there are students at the gym. Okay, so we would write for this one, Amy is practicing basketball is P. If and only if. Henry is playing piano, not playing piano. Or there are students in the gym. Try to make that a little. Oh, it's not, isn't it? Not Q or R. Okay. So I do a parentheses because there are two things before the comma, so the parentheses come before the or. If there are no students in the gym, but there's a no in there, so that's a not. Then, okay, so there's an if then. We haven't done an if then. Henry is playing piano. And, Amy is practicing basketball. All right. So you got to be careful with your commas on the if then because they are a little bit different. But if there are no students in the gym, so no students in the gym, you have the if then Henry is playing piano, and Amy is practicing basketball. Okay, so you probably put your parentheses around these two to signify that you do the if then. Oh, wait. I think I'd actually do it around these two. Might have to solve that one to double check that. Because that you're saying if there are no students in the gym, then these two things are happening. Okay? And that's kind of where it goes along with my comma right there. Let's solve it, make sure. Yeah, so you would if there are no students in the gym, then two things are happening. So I put my parentheses after that one. All right, back to up here for just a second. So truth tables, I think that's the majority of what we do the rest of the time. Truth tables for and. The rule is and for the whole statement to be true. If you're using the word and, they both have to be true. So it's only true when they're both true. This and this have to be true for the whole thing to be true. So the quick way to remember that is it's only true when they're both true. Or says kind of the opposite. Only one of them has to be true for the whole thing to be true. This or that have to be true for the whole thing to be true. So the opposite is to remember for or, it's only false when they're both false. So and is only true when they're both true. False is only false when they're both false. The squiggly line means not P. That is the opposite of P. So if P is true, you make it false. If it's false, you make it true. You just do the opposite of whatever you have there. And the new one that we're going to focus on today is the if-then. If P, then Q. Okay. The order of the first two do not matter because if they're both true, the order doesn't matter. If they're both false, the order doesn't matter, right? But the order of this one matters, and that's what makes this one like the trickiest one because you have to pay attention to that. So it is only false when the first is true and the second is false. It's only false when the first is true and the second is false. The reason being is because you're in a conditional statement, if then it's a conditional statement. And you're saying if this happens, then this should happen. So if this happens and this doesn't happen, that makes the whole thing false. I have a terrible example of this, but it kind of makes sense a little bit. If the stoplight is red, then you must stop. Okay, so we're thinking about like real life scenarios here or the law, right? So if the stoplight is red, then you must stop. That's true, right? Like if the stoplight is red, by law, you must stop. So true and true, okay? If the stoplight is red and you don't stop, then you have broken the law. So if the stoplight is red and it's false that you must stop, that doesn't make sense because we know by law, if the stoplight is red, you must stop, okay? So that's saying like, if this is true, then this one has to be true as well. All right, moving down to the third row. If the stoplight's red is false, so it's not red, then you must stop. There are scenarios in real life, like, right, if the stoplight's not red, then you still have to stop, right? Like someone's crossing the street or the traffic or, I don't know, whatever. Stupid geese that always want to delay traffic. Whatever, like you have all these different reasons, right? That if the stoplight's not red, you may still have to stop for a reason. And then the last scenario is, this is kind of where it goes wonky a little bit. If the stoplight's not red, there's no law that says you have to stop. Just because someone's crossing the crosswalk doesn't mean you have to stop. That's awful, obviously. Don't run over people. But there is no law that says you have to do that. So the only scenario here that, by law you have to do this is if the stoplight is red, then you have to stop. Like the only one you're breaking the law for sure is the second one. So the first is true and the second is false. Like I said, kind of a terrible example, but it's the one that's always in my head. I don't know why. All right. Why do I have all that right there? So let's go to, and you'll see what I'm talking about with the headers for sure on this one. I may even have to write it out. Oh, well, this one just gives you the easy one to start. Okay, so I know that's hard to see. Like I said, hopefully Alex update that quick. Some people said they had to zoom in and stuff to see it. All right. We don't even need an extra row on this one because it's just one step. Oh, wait, I will say this. This is actually a good one to start on. Okay, so this is if Q, then P. You can't read it. Q, then P. Q, arrow, P is what that last column says. The problem with this is the order matters, okay? So the order matters. You have to look at Q first and then P. So sometimes it is helpful to go ahead and rewrite P in the second column so that you can easily see it where Q is first and P is second, okay? So I think it's helpful to go ahead and do that because we want Q on the left and P on the right. If you do not do that, then you have to look at the Q column first and then go backwards to this one. So it would be first is true, second is false, right? So you would have to look backwards. So sometimes it's nice to just rewrite it so you have the Q on the left, the P on the right. So now we go, the if then says the only time it's false is if the first is true and the second is false. So that would be this one right here, okay? All the others should be true. True, true, false, true, true, false is false, false, false would be true, okay? The only time that it is false is when the first is true and the second is false. So the order matters. That is why it is nice to go ahead and just rewrite it in the order that it has it so you can see it. See if they give me a little bit of a harder one. Okay. Not P and not Q. Okay. So this is squiggly line P, arrow, squiggly line Q if you can't see it. Not P, if not P, then not Q. I said and. If not P, then not Q. So the first thing we want to do is find not P. Okay, so not P is the opposite of P. So false, false, true, true. Okay. Then I'm going to find not Q. Not Q. So not Q would be false, true, false, true. Okay, so I need to find if not P, then not Q. So I found not P and not Q. And now I can just do the if then. So if the first is true and the second is false, then it is false. So false and false would be true. False and true would be true. True and false. There's the first is true, second is false. That's false. And true would be true. Y'all loving truth tables? So if you are struggling, we definitely have some time. Definitely Thursday probably to go over some more of these and make sure we got it for the test next week. We will review on Tuesday and take the test on Thursday. There's a couple more truth tables we're going to keep doing right here. So these are the trickiest ones. Are probably the ones with the most steps. All right, this says if Q, then P or P. Okay, so this is going to combine everything that we've learned so far. If Q, then P or P. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite P so that I have it in order. True, because Q is first and then P. True. False. False. Okay, so now if Q then P, if Q then P, I'm looking at the Q column, the second column, and the P column because Q first then P. So true, true is true. False, true. Oops, I wrote F. False, true would be true. True, false. There's it is. First is true. Second is false. It's the only time it's false. False, false would be true. All right. So now I have to look at that fourth column, the one we just did, if Q then P, or P. The rule for or is if they are both false, it's false. Every other one is true. So I'm looking at, really I could look at, the order doesn't matter on this one, so I'm looking at like the third column and the fourth column. I'm looking at these two columns. So the only time it's going to be false is if they are both false. So that one is false right there. That would be true. Okay. Take these step by step. Use those. Add a column, subtract a column to your advantage. That is the only way or the best way to do these. Just take it step by step, and then you only have 3 rules. I mean, not counting the not. If you count the not, it's 4 rules. You do the opposite. When it's and, it's only true if they're both true. When it's or, it's only false if they're both false. Squiggly lines means the opposite. And the arrow, if the first is true and the second is false, is the only time it's false. All right, so here's another harder one. We got Q. I guess let's go with now. We've gone through all the scenarios. So I'm going to do inside the parentheses first. If Q, then not P and Q. Okay, that's hard to see. It's Q, arrow, squiggly line, parentheses, P and Q. So if Q, then not P and Q. So the first thing I'm going to do is find P and Q. The rule for and, it's only true if they're both true. So true, false, false, false. Okay. Now I need to find the squiggly of that. Such technical math talk when I say squiggly all the time. So I'm doing the not of that. Okay. I'm doing the not of the column that I just did. So I'm doing the opposite of this column. So I do false, true, true, true. Okay. All right, I'm not going to do this because I'm saving my work, but like I'm done with this column right now. So I could delete this column to make things even easier to look at, okay? So now I have if Q, which is this column, the Q column, then this column, all this. So I'm comparing the second column and the fourth column. So remember our rule for if then is it's only it's only false when the first is true and the second is false. So true right here, false right here, that's going to be false. False true would be true. True true would be true. And false true would be true. Okay. So there we went through every scenario. Take it step by step. If you try to do multiple steps at once, you will struggle with this. Why won't it let me get, okay. All right. Probably the last topic we'll do today is like doing a real life scenario of this. When Ryan bought a new battery for his car, the salesman at the auto parts store made this statement. If Ryan leaves his lights on overnight, then Ryan's car won't start in the morning. Okay? So let's make the statements be P, Ryan leaves his lights on overnight. Q, Ryan's car starts in the morning. So how do I write what the salesman said? I would say if Ryan leaves his lights lights on overnight, then his car will not start. Okay, so make sure you pay attention to what your original ones are. Even though the salesman is saying it starts with the not, but my original statement Q is Ryan's car starts in the morning. So by the salesman saying then Ryan's car won't start in the morning, I need to do not Q. Okay. So if P, then not Q. That usually isn't the issue. The issue on this problem is how do we fill out this truth table row? They give you a scenario. Suppose the following situation occurred. I wish they'd like highlight or do something, make this bold or something. Find this sentence because this is the only scenario that we're dealing with. This is how we use logic in real life. We may not do if then and make out a truth table, but our brain is going through this process. Last night, Ryan didn't leave his lights on overnight. This morning, Ryan's car started. Okay, so if P is Ryan leaves his lights on overnight, and in this scenario, Ryan didn't leave his lights on overnight, then P is going to be false, right? He didn't leave his lights on, so it's false. Ryan's car started, so that would be true because the Q is Ryan's car starts in the morning. So you have to use that sentence to figure out if P is false or true and Q is false or true. And that gives you that scenario. Now I'm going to use my truth table rules to see if the salesman in this sentence was true or false or whatever. Okay, so I need to find not Q. Oops. Not Q. Not Q would be false. All right. So now I'm saying if P, then not Q. So I'm looking at the first and the third column. That's an F and an F. If then is only false if the first is true and the second is false. So that is going to be true. So we would say that the... trying to highlight this real quick. We would say that in this scenario, the salesman was accurate, right? It does go along with it. Ryan didn't leave his car lights on overnight, and his car did start, so that makes the salesman accurate because the salesman said if Ryan leaves his lights on overnight, then the car won't start in the morning. You do have to watch these. Like, these doesn't always make sense, as in the one we got last class was about a dentist and brushing your teeth and cavities. And it said that if you don't brush your teeth every day, you don't get cavities. So don't just think about it like you got to use your truth table right there to get your answer. All right, so that's the first part of this section. Don't pack up yet. We're not done. We are going to talk about more about those conditional statements and different things we can do with them next